okay, well, what are you going to do? And so I started kind of like laying out this research study, and it started coming to me. And Dr. Halvenstein was like, okay, let's do it. She got me started with, doing this type of research, and it just continued on for the rest of my career. I still had so many questions that I wanted to find out. Um, One of the things that I wanted to concentrate on is confidence and self esteem in Black women, because I noticed throughout my studies that women who wore their hair natural had to have a different level of self esteem than those who did not, because of the fact that kinky, curly, natural hair is not accepted still in many parts of our society. And those women who were willing to go against the grain, they had to have a different level of self esteem, or higher levels of self esteem. And so that just fascinated me. And I just wanted to know more and more. And it led me to publishing several journal articles. It led me to doing book chapters. It led me to then putting together my own anthology. And that's what Black Hair in a White World is. And also, I mean, the exhibition. So I curated an entire exhibition about Black hair, Textures, the History and Art of Black Hair, which was amazing. That was an amazing experience. We got so much amazing press from that show, and published a beautiful book. And, in addition to that. And so it's been my journey. And so even now as an entrepreneur, I have branded myself as the Black Beauty Activist. And my podcast is the Black Beauty Activist podcast. And I talk about lots of different types of topics that are in relation to Black women, things that we go through, beauty, of course, but other things like, building a business, and what does it take to be an entrepreneur, or being a professional? What does that take? And how we need to be able to have, certain types, levels of confidence in order to be able to do the things that we want as Black women. I still haven't varied off of the path. It's just now it's different. It's just a little bit different, but the path is still the path.
Yes. Thank you for taking that path and adding to the knowledge, not just for scholars, but for, again, this global classroom
Yeah.
that you're teaching, because there are so many misconceptions, misunderstandings about Black hair and the experience of Black women. And thinking about your experience as a Black woman and a woman professor at Kent State, how was that being the first professor, and how did that impact your teaching and your leadership?
I honestly believe that if I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now as a motivational speaker, as a women's empowerment coach. I wouldn't be doing these things. The first 2 years, while I was on the tenure track, and even let me just say before then, after I finished my coursework for my PhD, I started off working as a part-time professor at Kent first while I was getting my PhD. And so while I had finished up all my coursework, there was a full-time non-tenure track position that became available. And I applied for it and got turned down. And then there, several months later, became another non-tenure track opening. I applied for it and got turned down the second time. Third time came around. Several months later, there was another non-tenure track position available, and I applied for it and got turned down for a third time. And because I was working there part-time, I saw all of the people that they had hired instead of me. At one point, I had gotten passed up for someone who only had a bachelor's degree, and I was ABD, all but dissertation. After the third time of being denied for a position, I had gone to one of my mentors and told her what was going on. And she took me right over to the affirmative action department and helped me file the complaint. And so after the complaint was filed, I magically got a job, to the dismay of my colleagues. So I started working there as a full-time, non-tenure track professor. And then after I finished my PhD, I went to the director at the time. We both know who he is. Went to the director and I said to him, the fashion school has never had a Black professor. I think it's time. And he said, I couldn't agree with you more. And so that's how I became the first Black professor.
Thank you for your perseverance. As a professor, you had an incredible career, not just only teaching, but also with your scholarly impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, I really don't think I would be doing what I'm doing now if I didn't have that journey because, like I said, the first 2 years while I was on the tenure track, once I became a tenure track professor, I was so afraid. I would go into to work and just be stagnant. Like the first couple of years, like those first 2 years, I didn't really produce any scholarly work because I was too afraid that they were watching me. They were waiting for me to mess up. They were waiting to be able to have the opportunity to say, "See, I told you she didn't belong here." And so that kept me stagnant for the first 2 years. And luckily, I had mentors in my life that helped to pull me out of that. A lot of prayer and a lot of meditation. And eventually I got to a point where I remember one day I came into work and I used to get so stressed out about walking into the building. Yolanda, I remember one time I was so stressed out, I caught shingles because I
Oh,
was so stressed out.
mhm,
Um, my hair started falling out because I was so stressed out.
mhm, mhm, mm.
And I was sitting at my desk one day in the office and I just heard God speak to me and he said, "Why do you care so much about what these people think about you? I put you here for a reason. You're supposed to be the first Black professor here." He said, "I need you to show up. I gave you talents. I need you to show up." And that lit a fire under me, and a fire that was inextinguishable.
It was.
Yes.
You did show up
Yes,
in
I
a big
did.
way.
Yes.
What many people don't realize is that being the first, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stress,
Mhm.
and it can be taxing on your confidence, and
Yeah.
that's an area that you're working in.
Mm.
So for many Black women, they are the first within their workplace, within a position. They're dealing with microaggressions, which I feel are really macro.
Yes. Yes.
And so, what are some ways that you coach Black women to deal with that stress and the pushback, the slight, because it does impact your physical, not only your
Mhm.
mental, but also your physical health?
Absolutely. I am a true advocate for this idea called a power of deserving. I had to get in my mind that I deserve to be in that space, regardless of what anybody else had to say. I deserved it because I worked damn hard to get there. I want any woman who was in a space where they are the first to understand that they deserve to be there. Wherever they are, they deserve to be there. Another thing that I am such an advocate for is authenticity. You must show up authentic. You must. Because if you don't, and you show up with the mask on, they're not going to get the full version of you. They're not going to get all of the excellence that you have to offer. They're not going to get it. That first 2 years while I was on the tenure track, I was wearing a mask because I was too scared to be my authentic self. So, first, know you deserve to be there. And then, second, be authentically you and do it excellent.
And so as you're talking about authentic you, would you share a little bit more what that means?
Yeah. Well, my first step into being an authentic me in regards to being a researcher or a scholar actually came with a conversation that I had with someone who who I believe has mentored both of us. Okay. So she was one of the first Black scholars in our field. And when I talked to her about what I wanted to do as my research topics in line of inquiry, I told her that I wanted to study about Black hair. And she said to me, she said, I really don't want you to study that because I want you to get tenure. If you do research about Black beauty and hair, they are not going to give you tenure. Do the research they want you to do so that you can get tenure. Once you get tenure, then start your journey with Black dress, Black hair, Black beauty. Well, knowing me and knowing that I only work in happiness, and the only thing that was going to make me happy was to study Black beauty. And so I didn't follow her advice. I had to show up authentically me. I couldn't do the research that they wanted me to do because I knew I wouldn't have been happy with it. And so I figured out a way to do my research. But I think what really helped me in doing it is that I got to the point where I was so excellent at everything that I did that even if they didn't agree with the topics that I was researching, they had no choice but to recognize my excellence. So I came up and I showed up so excellent that all they could say was, "Congratulations, Dr. Tameka." That's all they could say.
Mhm. And so do you feel that the bar is much higher and the expectations are higher for a Black woman in positions?
I say for sure. Well, let me just put it like this. When I first started